and pass over to Reg, who's going to talk about ELSIS and the Learning Board. There will be another occasion later on for us to get back into that conversation, but you see already there are some important issues coming out of this. Thank you. Reg.
Those that attended the self-evaluation session this morning, people said, we want to know some practical examples. Well, the next hour or so is about that. And we want to give you a chance to test out, all right, in artificial environment, both the work that Louisa's company offers, and that's what the laptops at the back are for, and also the ELSIS product that's been around for about a year and is just about finalising its perfect form, which is called the Learning Board. On the tables in front of you, you've got two documents, if you can help yourself. One is this one, which is called the Learning Board. There are little piles in the centre. And that's got rather more detail than I'm going to cover in the quarter of an hour or so. There's also something that is a questionnaire that's headed the Learning Board Development Programme. So you all need one of those. And the little activity at the end of the session today is going to be having a little trial at a little bit of this questionnaire. But ELSIS was looking at how it could help organise. Is that all right? Everybody? Right. They're being distributed if you haven't got them. But you don't need them this very instant. It's this one that's called the strategic. They should have gone out. That one. Everybody should have one of those. I thought this was the easy bit. Sorry, they're in piles on the table. The Learning Board was created by ELSIS to see what it could do to help governors with self-assessment, self-evaluation. Had a good look at the health service, which probably does this more than any other part of the public sector, but was particularly concerned that a lot of what happened in the evidence in the sector is that although self-assessment is done pretty religiously by colleges, usually as part of the college's self-assessment, the governor's self-assessment usually as part of that, often it's a bit problematic, partly because much of governance has been about compliance. So you have lots of boxes you've got to tick to have a good self-evaluation. But also there was a feeling that there was something missing. And some of that was about challenge. It's relatively easy now, colleges are usually very good at challenging the quality claims that are made for a particular academic area. It's much more difficult to challenge the quality claims that might or might not be made by governance or about governance. So the big idea, if you like, in the Learning Board is that the board is a team that needs to work effectively as a team. Now that's a little unusual if you look at all the formalities about governance, it's almost suspicious of the governance as a team. All the emphasis is on individuals and using their judgment independently of, and there's perhaps a fear of a groupthink. But in fact, this is the particular thing that we focus on here. How to make sure they're more effective teams in taking decisions. And probably the most influential contribution to developing the Learning Board is this book called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Quite a short book, you can read it in an afternoon, and it's a tale. It's written as a tale of woman takes over a company, finds all the problems, and turn to the back, and here are the solutions. Although as a Rotherham United season ticket holder, I don't actually need any books to tell me what a dysfunctional team looks like. And in fact, if the manager had got this, he might not have got the sack on Monday night. But we took that and said, well, what does it mean then to be an effective team? And in the middle of this leaflet here, there's a section that says methodology. And Lencioni says there are certain things that make an effective team, and they're the opposite, of course, of the dysfunctions. And these are the bullet points down in the middle page here. Trust in one another, that people are prepared to speak out, prepared to challenge one another, prepared to admit they don't know and ask for help. A willingness to engage in challenge and constructive debate. around ideas rather than about personalities or group politics. A commitment to action. Is it something more, the board meeting, than a good chat or a good discussion? Does it actually lead to a decision being taken that people are then committed to with a time scale and the necessary resources to carry it out? Is there a willingness to hold one another accountable? You know, for those governors that don't turn up or don't contribute. And finally, is there a shared focus on achieving collective results? Does everybody sign up to trying to achieve the same thing? Those are the 5 functions, if you like, that Lencioni looks at. And those are some of the reporting headings that are used in the Learning Board. So what does it involve, the Learning Board? Well, the first thing is it's essentially an observation, sitting in and looking at least 2 board meetings or committee meetings or away days, whatever, that's agreed with the college. Looking very much at the behaviours and the processes. Who talks, who doesn't? What's the debate going like? Do certain people dominate it or grandstand? Does the chair invite people to contribute or not? How does the principal conduct himself or herself to either dampen discussion or encourage them? So that's one element that ELSIS, 2 people come in and look at and observe. They don't participate in 2 board meetings or board events. That's complemented by the questionnaire that I've given to you, set out, which goes out to all governors, always via the chair and the principal and the clerk. So we work very closely with them. And that goes out to all of them. And then one-to-one interviews take place, or if that's not possible, it can be done by telephone, and it works quite well, to try and get the views of the individual governors around the same sort of issues. And what we find is that this is something that governors do value individually, including those. There was one occasion where we noticed that 1/3 of the people never spoke at a board meeting but they were certainly happy to speak, and we had to say, well, actually, now the next one is coming in. So it does unlock often the unspoken things that are going on below the surface in a board meeting. So those are the 2, if you like, evidence collection. One, us looking at board meeting, then asking the governors what they think. And the conclusion of that is a report. But it's a report back to the chairman, the chair, the principal, with the clerk present. How that's handled, if they want, we're happy to go to the board meeting, present it, and at the end of it, we identify areas where work's going to be needed to improve, as well as highlighting the things that are working well. That's really important to say what works well. The key to it is that we want the board to take on itself the responsibility of working up, with ELSIS assistance if needed, working up its own action plan. It's not an inspection where you come in, get beaten up and they walk away. This is something that is trying to help the board to learn about its own strengths and the areas for development. We've done about a dozen now, a dozen colleges, ranging from some that are outstanding and beacon colleges, some that have got notices to improve, one college that was sponsoring an academy that was a sort of failing school. So it's been tested, not in large numbers, but across quite a wide range. And there are 2 or 3 lessons that we're learning. And, you know, we have to say this is a relatively small sample. The first thing is it's different from every college. We do negotiate up front how it operates. Where does the college want to be? How long should it be? Which meetings should be observed? And that's really important because it provides the opportunity for the chair, and it's very much the chair and the principal, together with the clerk present, that we work to, that they can get the sign-up from their board of governors, because this is going to be challenging, and it also needs the involvement of most governors with the questionnaire. So that's the first thing.
Can I just ask,
Yeah.
if it's the chair that leads, what if they don't want to do this? That other people.
Well, if we don't do it, then they wouldn't hire us in the first place.
But what if it's perhaps needed or identified by other members of the governing body who'd like to do it?
Well, I think that's a debate that would then have to take place within the governing body. But ultimately, somebody's got to contact ELSIS and say, we wish to commission you to undertake this piece of work. Now, what we're trying to do is, as we go through these, write them up as case studies, so there at least is some written by the participating colleges. There are currently 2 on the website. I forget which they are, sorry. And more will come in through this term. So we hope to have something there that you can take to perhaps the sceptics. But it may be the sceptics on the board rather than the chairman. If the chair's signed up, then things can happen. If the chair's not signed up, then frankly it's not likely to be terribly effective. Although some interesting things have come out about the chair. The other thing is that it does engage the one-to-one interviews. One particular case, we had a chair said at the board that we observed, I'm standing down at the end of this year, you need to be thinking who's going to replace me, can we have some discussion? And no discussion followed. It's absolutely, which you would expect, and he probably expected that as well. However, when we did the one-to-one interviews, the governors, the independent governors, some of them very quiet in the meeting, were very happy to say they valued what the current chair has provided and they want to continue with these things, but equally there are certain things they would like to add on to the current, and we were able to report those back, wholly anonymised. So there is a report back, and it does, in a sense, reflect the views as we interpret them. We have the meeting with the chair, the principal and the clerk to give our report, and at that there's the chance, if there are any mistakes, as there sometimes can easily be, to correct those. The process does engage people, and that's the critical point. It does mean that it leads to some action. 3 things the small number so far of substantive issues that have come out. One is that you'd expect most governing bodies perhaps to be dominated by the executive. But what was perhaps alarming for the future is that when there are those really big issues, you might only get a couple a year that really are fundamental, that they were almost treated in the same way. Very rarely were alternatives or options provided. It was very much dominated by the executive or the principal and the chair. So we did feel that was something that issues were not being brought out. You can't have options on every decision all the time, but there are some times where options need to be brought out for the governing body to do its role in looking after the education character in the future. So that,
what did you mean by dominated by the executive?
Sorry?
What did you mean by dominated by the executive? Do you mean senior management team? Because
oh yeah, I mean, what I mean is
only the principal can be a board member, governor. The other vice principals, whatever they are, can't.
oh yeah, but it does depend on how the principal chooses to present the papers. Sometimes principals say, this is the view of the executive team. Sometimes it's their view. So I'm just using the example. Often there'll be it's quite common for other people to attend meetings, but not necessarily, no, but very rarely things aren't decided by voting. All we're saying is the information that's presented is often in such a way, with the combined expertise of the executive, that it's very difficult for governors, even on the really big issues, to pick out what alternatives there might be. Well, that's the second thing. The second thing that we noted is that there was a tendency to what you might call a polite consensus. Doesn't mean to say there aren't plenty of contributors, but not a lot of vigorous disagreement. And what we do know about effective teams, and we know a lot managerially about effective teams, is they have strong personalities in them. People who, perhaps even the contrarian, who asks the awkward question. And that's almost his or her role within the governing body. So that healthy challenge is often quite low.
But may I add that if you are that sort of person, nervous and challenging, and you're invited to join a board to help them that hasn't really experienced robust and challenging debate that we get in other sectors, it's quite easily seen by those other corporation colleagues that you're being argumentative and confrontational. And I've been told that when I've gone in as a robust and challenging governor, because they're not used to it, and it's not City of Bath as my chair says it,
Yes, but that's the point. That what we were reporting back is that there seemed an unwillingness to argue out big issues. Whether the contrarian or not is a particularly useful function, it might well be. But boards have to accept that because you agree all the time doesn't necessarily mean you're operating terribly effectively.
Can you cite any examples of where a board should have gone one way when its executive was another and it all ended in tears?
Well, if
Seems a bit squeaky.
yeah, okay. We're not necessarily saying that the board has got it wrong. Sorry, that the board and the principal has got it wrong. But I'll give you an example where I think is an outstandingly good example of where a board just outside the sector, very much outside the sector, has done something outstanding that illustrates what I'm talking about. The BBC faces massive financial problems over the next few years because it's got frozen licence fee and taking over all sorts of things. And as part of its austerity management, the Director General brought forward plans to decimate lots of local radio. And the board is not the same legally and constitutionally, it's much more independent of the executive. But the board said, well, we actually think you got this wrong. We understand the austerity, we understand the need to take it back, but go back and look at it again and bring us some more modified proposals. Now, they weren't necessarily able to do that because of the information that was presented to them, but they did it because that was the way they were. Hang on, I'll just give you 1 second.
I was going to say, there's another view that it was a very cunning DG who never wanted Radio 6 closed.
Well, it may well be, but
restricted the campaign,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's always that view, but the point was the executive had brought a proposal that was not endorsed by the governing body. Now, just to answer your question very, very briefly, a number of colleges are now sponsoring academies. Now, if you are a high-achieving college, an outstanding college, and you're taking on a basket case, which it may well be, that to me is a fundamental issue that needs arguing out on what it means, because that is a change in the character and a much broader mission. You're serving the community, perhaps your local school, local community, which is rather different from perhaps your previous mission, which was about being a top-performing college that draws from all over the region because they come to you because you get better A-level results. I'm using the words very carefully here. Now that's the kind of debate that requires the governing body to be led into it and opened up about the dangers and the risks as well as the opportunities.
But that's why you have strategic away days where the principal can put ideas and concepts to the governing body to get a feel for how they, the direction they want to go in, whether they're going to sell the farm or not, that sort of thing. So that paper coming to the corporation should be a surprise.
Well, it might or might not, but they have different ways of using their away days. My point here was that what we experienced in most of the ones we've looked at and elsewhere is, perhaps it's common in much of the public sector, a polite respectfulness to one another. And that doesn't always augur well for some of the really difficult decisions that colleges might have to make over the next few years. And what we try and do in the Learning Board, and I'll finish now, is to hold that up to the board and say, this is what we saw in the meetings that we sat in on, and also this is what your people are saying from in an anonymised version. And we hope that by holding that up, it will identify some of the good things, and we do see lots of good practice, but also focus boards on where they need to do some extra work in order to be fit for the challenges that everybody's been talking about for the rest of today. I'll stop there.
Sorry, I thought you said there were 3 key issues that you'd identified, and I managed to get down to.
Sorry, the second one was because he led me into it. So it was the polite consensus. The first was the executive domination. The second was the polite consensus. The third one was that we did, in fact, find a lot of very good practice. You know, whether it be in difficult colleges that were in difficulties or outstanding colleges. There is a lot of good practice out there, and most colleges are doing a good job. The chief inspector, the Ofsted, about half got good or outstanding. One thing I would say, though, is that if you want to be outstanding in the next run of inspection, you have to be outstanding at teaching and learning. Now, governors have got pretty good at looking at success rates, and retention achievement, I suspect they're far less comfortable with issues about what good teaching and learning, or what outstanding teaching and learning is. And I think that's going to be a challenge the next 4 or 5 years. Governments will be getting to grips with that. They can't forget success rates, otherwise you get clobbered. But what does good teaching and learning look like? And that's, or outstanding teaching and learning. That's not always something that governors have had central to their work, but maybe that will have some implications for the kind of people that get recruited onto governing bodies in the future. Anything else?
I'm going to suggest you stay there, Rich.
Right, okay, yeah.
What we've got coming up next are a couple of practical sessions where both Reg and Louise will be presenting their particular areas of work, and you've got the questionnaire in front of you. There will be, after that, those 2 sessions, an opportunity for us to get together again in the plenary and explore some of the themes, which obviously are exciting people. So, Reg, if you'd like to introduce
I thought we'd give
questionnaire
just a little
itself.
sample, just for about a quarter of an hour, looking at this questionnaire. This is the questionnaire that every governor gets if their college buys into the Learning Board. Not everybody is able to be interviewed for logistical reasons, but if everybody was available, we would interview them all. If you look at there are 5 areas. What we wanted to do was just get a bit of a feel of just looking at the first page, which is the area that says core business.
Sorry, you've got spare copies.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any? No, there are facts. The first one is really to explore how far governors understand and share an understanding of what the core business is of the college. So the questions that are down there, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, they're just, if you like, a lead into it. They're a way of, and people have got this beforehand, so they can answer it in every way they like. But the first one is asking what they thought of the core purpose of the college. Not as easy as it might seem. Second one is, can they describe the college's values? And then the third one, what do they think are the 3 main risks that the college faces? Now, what we were going to do is just to give you a few minutes and ask you if you can just sit in pairs. There's no feedback on this, by the way. It's really just to take about 5 to 7 minutes each, asking one another. So if you like interview and just get a feel of what kind of answers there might be and how easy it is for your college to answer the question.